Good morning. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I'm so excited to share with you today, to engage and discuss. And in typical Tiece Ruffin fashion, I am going to flip the script a little bit, ask us to reframe the narrative and question resilience. I hope y'all are ready for some inquiry, a little bit of investigation, and I cannot wait to hear your questions. All right, let me share my screen here. Resilience. Wow. I toyed with this a little bit. I said, you know what? I don't want to share the characteristics or traits of resilience. I want us to think about the meaning of the concept, for us to question, are you resilient? Am I resilient? What is resilience really? I share today with you from the perspective of a sharecropper's granddaughter, and in questioning, investigating, interrogating resilience. Because when I looked up resilience and I saw words like challenges, trauma, adversity, difficulties, toughness, compression, being squeezed, setbacks, barriers, disappointment, misfortunes, I said, wow, resilience. What does that mean? And is it asset-based or is it deficit-based? Tiece, the granddaughter of a sharecropper, are you resilient? Is it something that describes you in terms of strengths and capabilities? Or does it describe something that might be deficit in origin? Many of you know what sharecropping means. And I say this is from the perspective today, the lens of being a sharecropper's granddaughter, is that my maternal grandfather in Orange County, North Carolina, was a sharecropper for many years, a tenant farmer, before I remember him being a faculty worker. So yes, we know the history of sharecropping in the United States post-Reconstruction with formerly enslaved people and being tenant farmers. I recently visited Charleston, South Carolina, to the McLeod plantation, and I recognized and was presented with the information there that sharecropping on that plantation in Charleston did not even end until the 1990s as tenant farmers, not owning their own land, paying, living on the lands and paying to the owner of that land just for a share. And the conditions were not humane. So I speak to you today from that strength and that perspective of my maternal grandfather, who was a sharecropper. So in that spirit, I question the term resilience. Go with me on this journey today. To me, as I struggled with, wrestled with, contemplated resilience, it seems to come from a place of brokenness, trauma, a deficit. And I was thinking about it for the past 3 months when Brandy approached me. And I said, why does the word deficit keep cropping up for me for resilience? Is resilience rooted in deficit-based thinking? Am I the poster person for resilience? Do I embody resilience? Am I the standard, one of the hallmarks of resilience? You can see in this clip from the Washington Post, as you read in my bio, I was born in Washington, D.C., Howard University Hospital, grew up in the Northeast section of D.C. across from Gallaudet University, and did not leave the District of Columbia until college. You see a picture of me. DC Mayor Marion Barry hugs Tiece Ruffin, 10, who was shot in the leg in September as 2 warring gangs shot at each other in the Trinidad area where Tiece lives. Barry announced a 30-day drug crackdown in the neighborhood. So I started to wonder, am I resilient because I'm a gun violence survivor? Because I'm a first-generation college student, now a college professor? Really, what is resilience? Does it apply that there is a problem to overcome? And that problem is solely in my ability. Does resilience blame me for my own situation? Does resilience say the issue is inherent to me? Thus, I must do something to overcome. I thought, what about the inequities, systemic and institutional, that plague and hover around me as a Black woman in US society? Is it based in that deficit and that it's all inherent to me and I am the over one that has to overcome it? So these were the questions I started to wrestle with and I generated. Again, does it focus on what's wrong with me? Does it focus on my problems? Does it limit my success to my own ability? Is the term resilient based on deficiencies and deficits located within me as a Native Washingtonian, as a first-generation college student, as a gun violence survivor? Does resilience intimate that there are shortcomings that I overcame because they were my weaknesses that are rooted in cultural, racial, or physiological in nature? Are the challenges, the failures, the difficulties, the barriers, and setbacks inherent to people themselves? That's real talk. That's what I grappled with for the past 3 months of resilience. Wow, what do I say about resilience? What are my beliefs? And to be honest with you, I still question. So that's why I wanted to take you with me on this journey of inquiry and investigation. Is resilience deficit-based, or is resilience situated in asset-based thinking? A friend of mine showcased and shared this tweet with me. I had seen it across Facebook myself, and when a friend of mine, a good friend, sent this to me, I thought, wow, Tiece, is this another example of resilience? And the question you're grappling with around, is resilience deficit-based or asset-based? And you can see there, I dreamed of never being called resilient again in my life. I'm exhausted by strength. I want support. I want softness. I want ease. I want to be amongst kin, not patted on the back for how well I take a hit or for how many. That resonated with me. And I saw that example and I said, okay, so is resilience rooted in deficit-based or asset-based thinking? Because asset-based thinking focuses on the strengths, it focuses on the potential, it focuses on what I bring versus what I lack. Asset-based thinking are the attributes to be celebrated versus things that I'm constantly trying to overcome to triumph. I know who I am, and I am in tune with my identities. As I wrestled with the notion of resilience and whether it was rooted in deficit-based or asset-based thinking, these are some of the guiding questions. I asked myself, Tiece, are you resilient? What makes you resilient? And are these specific examples of resilience? So I decided to delve into my identity, to engage in introspection, to commune with self and tap into memory. Let me say that again. I delved into identity, engaged in introspection, communed with self, and tapped into memory. As you saw, Goldie Muhammad said in Cultivating Genius, identity is made up of who we say we are and who others say we are and who we desire to be. Because we are complex beings, we have racial, cultural, gender, environmental, and community identities. What did that mean for me in exploring resilience? So I said, in looking at my own identity, Tiece, are you resilient because you was born in Washington, D.C. in the late 1970s and you're a granddaughter of a North Carolina sharecropper? Are you resilient because you're a gun violence survivor who was shot in the legs 3 days before your 11th birthday? Where Kate Boo in the Washington Post article said, Her bloody sock sat for days on a living room table. Her slumber party was canceled. She turned 11 years old in an adjustable hospital bed. She was snagged by the violence of the district's crack trade, catching a stray bullet during a shootout. Am I resilient because I'm a first-generation college student? Am I an academic with a PhD in curriculum and instruction that is resilient because against all odds, notice the words odds, and persevered? Is that what resilience is about? Beating the odds, persevering, taking hits? So Tiece, is that deficit or that asset? Because read on to see what Kate Booth said. But in the places, as O'Donnell of the DC police put it, there was zero quality of life. Am I resilient because someone said that a Black girl from Washington, DC, gun violence survivor, where they said there was zero quality of life? And inside the tiny houses are a few kids such as Tiece. Years after the bullet, she's not a casualty of the district's crack wars, she's a graduate of them. Even in so-called barren spaces with toxic conditions, unique compositions grow. I kept wrestling with, does this make me resilient? And is that resilience something to be seen as asset or deficit? It's interesting to see how people describe another person. I really stayed in a place where I wrestled with and said, is that resilience? I engaged in poetry, free verse poetry, to really start to think about and explore, as Goldie Muhammad said, exploring that identity, thinking about myself, introspection, communing with self, tapping into memory, writing. Is that what resilience is? Because of this, would I not be resilient? Is resilience not, if this was not the case today, as Brandy described, US Fulbright scholar, and other things that I have achieved because of where I'm from? Is that deficit? Is that asset? Is that what resilience is? Because I came from here and now I'm this. I've overcome, I've triumphed. I had trauma. There was deficit. That for me was brokenness. And was it all inherent to me? That people thought the inherent issues or the problems were in me. So I had to overcome. Did people think about the institutional and systemic inequities, again, that were hovering around me, that were plaguing? Or is it from the asset-based perspective? Think about that with me for a second. Is this what makes a person resilient? I hope one would not say, yes, this is an example of resilience. Or one would say, oh, yes, Tiece Ruffin, Dr. Ruffin is an example of Black exceptionalism. You know what I'm talking about. Black people who are smart, who are educated, they are atypical and rare among Black people. I refute that. If resilience connects to Black exceptionalism, is resilience something that is asset-based or is it deficit? Because if it connects to Black exceptionalism, then it says that biases and stereotypes and that people see me as less than. I am not an exception to the rule. Resilience does not indicate that someone is exceptional, especially if we think about Black exceptionalism. Black people are indeed smart, are excellent, are not atypical, and not rare. Let's set those biases, those stereotypes and the myths to the side. I grapple with that too, because I've heard people say that, oh, such and such is so resilient and they're so exceptional in the term of, and I went, exceptional in the term of Black exceptionalism? So I thought about, okay, Tiece, This Black exceptionalism thing, have you seen an example? And I give you the words of Dr. Jarvis Givens himself in a recent post, an article that he's published in The Atlantic, who is from Compton, California, who's a Harvard professor. And when I read this, and you see this screenshot, this resonated with me because I said, wow, Tiece, is this pointing to resilience and Black exceptionalism? And we must refute that. And you can hear what Dr. Givens said. People often remind me that my story is peculiar. What does peculiar mean? I am a Black kid from Compton who becomes a Harvard professor. People see that as unusual, odd, strange. Maybe they even see it as resilient for a kid from Compton. So then I started to wonder, is resilience based upon preconceived notions that lack in one's humanity? Why would a Black kid from Compton not become a Harvard professor? Why is it peculiar, strange? Is it that he is not fully human with dignity, respect, and value? Is it that his brilliance is not recognized? That exceptionalism, that this might be a Black gentleman who's rare and atypical, doesn't fit the stereotype and biases of what we think about Black people. And if that is the case, then we are not recognizing the full humanity. And then resilience and Black exceptionalism must be debunked, dismantled, disrupted. He said, although I'm apprehensive to conflate a job at Harvard with some universal vision of success, I do recognize why my family, my friends, and even those with whom I am acquainted take pride in the accomplishment. But this flattened narrative of individual achievement misses a key aspect of my development. Now, he goes on to talk about anti-racist teaching and what we can learn from Black teachers. But the first part of his essay is what caught me, because I saw a peculiar Black kid from Harvard, and I saw a flattened narrative of individual achievement. So in our inquiry today, as we move on and thinking about resilience, and we're investigating it, is it asset-based or is it deficit-based? And what are the questions do I have around this term? I see this as something interesting for us to contemplate. I then also ask you, is resilience that something that has been racialized? Is resilience, is it only for Black, Indigenous, and other people of color? Does resilience rob me of anything? Does it rob you of anything? And does it come with preconceived notions? It's just, in a quick dictionary search, and I did look at the American Psychological Association definition of resilience. I looked at Psychology Today, and everything about resilience was about elasticity, adapting, enduring, overcoming, moving forward in spite of, getting through pain and disappointment. And I said, does that come with preconceived notions? Have we racialized it? Because I listened to Good Morning America and I heard different stories, and I said, Tiece, be in tune over these 3 months before this talk in May. Who is described as resilient in our society? Who is described as resilient? And does resilience rob people of anything? Does it rob them of their humanity? These are just questions. I look forward to our discussion. These are just questions. So I said, in my own journey of wrestling with and grappling with resilience, is it deficit-based? Is it asset-based? My own investigative journey, my own interrogation and questioning, I said, Tiece, all right, flip the script, reframe the narrative, reverse. Does resilience actually allow one to live in and exist in their full humanity? Does resilience operate in excellence? Does resilience acknowledge ancestral manifestation? Does resilience, is it language that uplifts my humanity rather than brokenness or trauma? Does it delve into my lineage? Does resilience allow me to lean into my culture, family traditions, and heritage? So, in reframing the narrative and really thinking about, okay, Tiece, if you're kind of leaning towards is resilience deficit or asset based, you're trying to lay out all the evidence and examples, you're going back and forth. I said, let me do something called the textual lineage. And at this time, I just begun a class called Ed 314, Multiple Literacies and Content Areas with UNC Asheville students. And I was also in an Africana Studies class, African American Education. So I embarked on this and thought about this and actually engaged in this with my UNC Asheville students. I said, will this textual lineage allow me to reframe the narrative, to see resilience from an asset-based lens? Will it allow me to see strengths and capabilities already present? It will not simply allow for people to think about me as a descriptor of trauma and overcoming and enduring pain and being triumphant. And then I said, what has fortified me? What has strengthened me? What has allowed me to thrive? So I ventured into a textual lineage coined by Dr. Alfred Tatum, as you can see him there. And in textual lineage, I remembered this from Dr. Tatum, and I also know that Goldie Muhammad in Cultivating Genius also cited Dr. Tatum in textual lineage. And I said, let's go there. Tiece, what has fortified, strengthened you? Get to your strengths and your capabilities. So more introspection, more tapping into and communing with self. And you can see Dr. Tatum said, create a list of meaningful and significant text and books that are significant in your life. They can be movies, books, poetries, works of art, and other texts that have shaped our thinking and understanding. And then think about how much it has impacted your being. And I said, ooh, resilience, my being, tapping in, drawing from this lineage. Okay, I am my ancestors' wildest dreams. Let me tap into my culture, my family traditions, my heritage. Take a dive into memory. Think about things from the roots to the present. Commune with self. Think, reflect. Dr. Tatum described for himself in his own textual lineage that these were some of the things that were involved. He then mentioned Black Boy, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, the autobiography of Malcolm X. So in my introspection and my thinking and my reflecting, drawing upon my ancestral manifestation, my family heritage, I started to think about my roots. As Stephanie said earlier, I had from her own experience, my roots in my family was definitely in a Southern Baptist Christian tradition. I remember the Holy Bible in my home. I remember the Bible in my grandparents' home, other family members. I remember it holding birth certificates, obituaries. All of that was at the roots as I started to delve in and tap into memory, to think and to reflect. What has nurtured my humanity? I started to think of movies and photos and text, and you can see some here, from Reading Rainbow to Care Bears, to Gorgeous Ladies of Wrestling, to soap operas, the multiple things that impacted my life. I then kept going with this and said, what are some things for middle school and high school? My mom had a set of encyclopedias in the house. Why was that significant to me? How did it shape my thinking? How do I draw upon that? Does it contribute to resilience? Does it contribute to my thriving? How does all of this stuff, memory and introspection, lead me to the notion of resilience today? In terms of disability, I remember of Mice and Men. I remember the movie Roots. I remember Phyllis Wheatley and seeing that an enslaved woman who wrote poetry, Tapping into Native Son by Richard Wright. Why these things were significant to me, meaningful. What did I draw from? Fly Girl by Omar Tyree. What were some of the things that I had to think about that has contributed to and shaped my thinking? Is this what makes one resilient? Is this gets me on the path to understanding resilience? Does this help me clarify that resilience is deficit or asset based? And of course, through this, I came to the conclusion the souls of Black folk, the beautiful ones, are not yet born. Things fall apart. The film Sankofa, reading the miseducation of the Negro, actually being in a class and reading the book Tom Coon's Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks, having read Gloria Steinem right during my initial stage of college, of really starting to think about how and what allows me to thrive. Is it because I'm resilient? Or is it because I am actually drawing upon my strengths and capabilities, my assets to thrive? What has fortified me? That they're drawn from the power of community and family, from my culture, from my family traditions, from my heritage. The textual lineage really gave me the idea where I had, if resilience is to be asset-based, then yes, I am drawing from the legacy and the rich tradition, the ancestral manifestation. I'm tapping into that. I'm looking at the wonderful kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and Songhai Empire. And I'm tapping into that. You see the picture at the bottom there of Yah Asantewaa, who stood up to the British during colonialism in Ghana. I said, look at these freedom fighters. I am tapping into that memory. I am drawing upon that legacy of ancestral manifestation. I am taking it upon myself to operate in my humanity and not let anyone take my humanity away, my dignity, my respect, my value. I am drawing on the strength of my maternal grandfather as a sharecropper who withstood and triumphed. So Tiece, is that deficit or asset? Because deficit is saying that there are issues and problems inherent to me that I have to overcome. It is without institutional parameters. So for me, I came to the in conclusion that while I do see resilience as from a place of brokenness, deficit, and trauma, I also see resilience in terms of assets, my strengths and capabilities. The things that have protected me, that have fortified me, that have allowed me to thrive, come from the power of my community and my family, my traditions, my heritage, my culture, my ancestors, past, current, from the memory and those legacies. And I will operate in humanity, and I will be intentional in nurturing myself to live in and exist in my full humanity. Now that is resilience. Thank you.